Everybody, Professor John McMurtry.
Thank you. The global corporate experiment has failed. Existence on Earth is in rapid decline on every level of life organization. The air, the soil, and the water cumulatively degrade and disappear. The climates and oceans destabilize without connection. Species become extinct at a spasm rate across continents. And food polluters, songbirds, coral reefs, and large animals all crash at once. Public sectors and services are defunded and privatized as tax evasion by the rich multiplies. The global food system produces more and more disabling junk and wastes. Non-contagious diseases multiply to the world's biggest killer. The global financial system issues money out of control while collapsing in productive investment. The vocational future of the next generation is slashed across the world. Official lies and corruption are normalized as public relations. All the trends are one way, all are degenerate, and all are undeniable. Yet where are the dots joined? Where have you ever seen the dots joined? The common cause is taboo to name. Overpopulation is the stock explanation, but it blinkers out the causal mechanism altogether. Transnational corporate resource extractions, wastes, pollutions, and depletions of life-carrying capacities everywhere. It is not doubling world populations that poison and hollow out the world. The majority poor control only a fraction of the Earth's resources. What drives the end game is exponentially multiplying money demand and commodities with ever more wastes. They more than double every decade or few years, but global population rates halve as the damages still escalate. That educated people can go on blinkering out the actual causal mechanism while blaming the majority poor reveals the derangement of this ruling value system. Not even prophets like Chris Hedges decode it. Journalists are trained not to. Not even moral philosophers question the system worshipped, masked as the free market. Freedom means no accountability to human and world life, while competition means competing to externalize all costs onto the lives of citizens and environments. The value driver behind it all is no more questioned than the Almighty. It can do no wrong. But one underlying lockstep of false equations propels this unnamed war on the world through its mutations and metastases. And this is the source code, as I go on to call it. Rationality equals self-maximizing choice. That's just de rigueur. People don't know this outside the academy so much, but Peter certainly knows it. That's what rationality is, self-maximizing choice. You go from there, and then that means always more money for the self is good. So that's the ethic. Equals self-multiplying sequences of ever more money to the top as the ruling growth system. Equals all else is disposable means to this multiplying pathogenic growth. My 15-year study, The Cancer Stage of Capitalism from Crisis to Cure, which I think is posted there, diagnoses this ruling value mechanism as cancerous in principle. It is, in short, a deregulated self-multiplication of transnational money sequences accountable to nothing but their own multiplication with no committed life functions. With the Hayek-Reagan-Thatcher crusade to reverse the history of the world into a moronic free market and conservative values, the march was on. Marxists would not engage this great reversal on moral grounds because morality was believed to be only ruling class ideology. This left no life ground to stand upon. From the transnational victory of corporate world rule from 1991 on, reversals of social states were portrayed as market miracles, whatever the results for people's lives. The magic of the market was the new world religion, the end of history. The mass media were consolidated into one collective corporate organ across cities and borders. Death squads erased community oppositions in the South. The academy was and still is defunded to serve the global corporate market and commodity development. The nations of the world are all the while restructured to be subordinate functions to the supreme moral goal of transforming humanity and the world into ever more private commodities and profits. And again, I emphasize, it appears to be the most anti-moral system one can imagine, but in fact it is a moral system and is defended as a moral system, and through the notion of the free market and the self-maximizing atoms, optimizing consequences by an invisible hand that will necessarily turn out this way. It is a morality. It's a crazy morality, but it is one. It is an ethic, and in fact, that's where they ultimately go, which you see going on in Ukraine, for example, right now. They're going to the ultimate ethic, and the ultimate ethic are those series of equations I gave earlier. So society itself does not exist to this ruling value mechanism. They come right out and say it, but it's still a value mechanism. Its logic of growth is totalitarian and malignant to the marrow. More precisely, deregulated global corporate money sequences abolish by treaties and by wars all barriers whatever to their free multiplying growth through all that exists, whatever the destruction of natural and social life support systems. My work has been to decode this globally life-invading value system. Predictably, the diagnosis is taboo to mention in the press, however confirmed by the facts and the predictions. No social disorder ever allows its ruling program to be publicly unmasked. Thus, the malignant value code marches on. Alarm bells at the degenerate symptoms increase, but solutions only extend the system further and deeper. Life value economics is as unspeakable as the fatal disorder itself. Next section is called the essential first step in winning the war of the world is comprehension of it. Only system analysis can lay bare the underlying value program, but it is avoided. The scientists do not study values and specialize. They talk about value free and not value neutral, though they've got the most rigorous value system going, and specialize in domains of self-referential meaning. Journalists report facts, spectacles, and impressions, but not the underlying values governing them. Philosophers seldom analyze the ruling value system of the societies within which they live from social habit and from fear. In the age of instant culture, value system comprehension does not sell. Together, these blocks of normalized avoidance make the value code selecting for all the degenerate trends invisible to us. They're all predictable. As in immune system failure, the life host fails to recognize the disorder devouring it. Lacking any unifying framework of comprehension, people are lost. Thus, when millions rise in the Occupy Wall Street movement, there is no policy diagnosis or demand. Although Wall Street had indisputably defrauded masses and was on its knees, broke and failed, no policy shift arose or was even proposed. That was what just threw me. Not even public control of the public money infusing the system cancer, $16 trillion at last count by Senate in the U.S. alone. It's now nearing 30 trillion in the world. Trillion, 30, given to the banks to get them out of their failure. Well, everybody else, and you know where it's coming out of, all the social programs and austerity programs. And where do you see that connection made? It's not made in the mass media. Nor was there a movement for needed public mortgage system. Even after the private system had perpetrated the biggest fraud in history, indebted tens of millions of people into ruin, and collapsed the economies of the West into irreversible debt. The lost alternative of public banking, on which the U.S. Revolution was itself founded, Lincoln won the War of the Union, of union. North Dakota has had 100 years of debt-free prosperity. All of these are public bank. We've already had public banks in all these cases, public banking. Again, I'll repeat them. The U.S. Revolution itself. The U.S. Revolution was over colonial script. That's what is explained, although never talked about now, by Benjamin Franklin as why they had to go to a revolution. Because the Bank of England, private, canceled the right and had the cabinet on their side, because they were all investors, to withdraw all their colonial script by which they had been made very prosperous societies. And then they fell into a deep depression. So that was the first time. That was what the American Revolution was fought over. But how many people in this room know that or have even heard it? It's also the way Lincoln won the Civil War. The New York bankers wanted to charge 17 to 25% compound. He couldn't do that, so he issued the greenbacks as the currency of the land, of the realm, and that's how the war was won. And then guess what happened with Lincoln? And no one draws together those connections. But it's not just there. Inside North Dakota, for over 100 years, they've had a public banking system, and they have had public debt-free prosperity. The only country with, the only state with lower unemployment than any, lower debt than any, and so on. The West itself managed the 1939 to 45 war and the post-war years to unprecedented full employment. And first Japan and now China wins in productive investment. All is amnesiac in the West. That's why China's gone ahead. It has a public banking system right down to the municipal level. Never hear about that, do you? That's the amazing thing, how all this is kept taboo to know. Fast forward to today, and the underlying system cancer advances on. The financial giants causing the 2008 crash are bigger and richer in criminal impunity. They speculate with the publicly supplied trillions on food and water futures. They control even Rio Plus 20 as the life-ground catastrophe they finance explodes on one front after another. Transfused with endless more public money to bleed and indebt the world dry, the money-printing system metastasizes further, now occupying the once prosperous social democracies of the European Union, with public money bled out of people's lives and life bases to private banks with no limit. That's the fall of the European Union. Refusing any regulatory limits, converting pensions into more stock market feeding troughs, investing nothing into youth unemployment or employment, and with debt spikes ever higher for all, where does it all end? It ends when public money and human rights stop being fed to the failed system. All rights go to the transnational money sequence system through trade treaties. It ends when public money and human rights stop being fed to the failed system. It ends when commodity cycles of destructive waste are stopped. It ends at the base of the disorder when the 97% counterfeiting of debt and credit by private financial institutions is publicly controlled. Next section is economic doctrine allows money cancer system a free rein. Neo-economic theory is a pseudoscience. Its defining postulates are unfalsifiable by facts. All organic, social, and ecological life requirements are absurdly assumed away. They don't exist. Infinite demand on finite resources is presupposed as sustainable. Mechanical reversibility of everything is taken for granted. Whatever does not fit the doctrine is rejected. Endlessly self-maximizing atomic cells, whether individuals or corporations, are believed to necessitate. This is actually the doctrine. This will necessitate the best of all possible worlds. That's just not my figure. That's what optimize means, the best of possible worlds. This is built right into the inner logic of the higher mathematics of market theory that you get all the Nobel Prizes for. They're all locked into it. And how does it necessitate the best of all possible worlds by self-maximizing atoms? By the invisible hand. Is this not a fanatic religion? Superhuman laws dictate commands across peoples. No deadly consequences of lower certitude in the miracles of the market God. Even when the ruling value mechanism visibly depredates the very life basis of the world, the only reforms are to globalize it further. This is what I call the death spiral. Corporate lawyer treaties coined in secret rule as the new laws of nations, while hostile zones are subjected to covert forces sponsoring civil wars, as was promised after 9/11. We're gonna destroy the following societies: Afghanistan, Iran. This is what Wolfowitz said, and was reported in the memoirs of Wesley Clark. Afghanistan, Iraq, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, all happened, and it's all happened since. And now the Ukraine, as I write. All is believed in and pursued as a world crusade, even if fascists lead it, as it is occurring there. One supreme goal governs underneath bizarre beliefs: multiplying growth of transnational money sequences at ever higher velocities and volumes with no limits tolerated. No blocks or impediments are allowed. This is the moral DNA of the ruling value mechanism. In theory, it is expressed well by University of Chicago professor and godfather of the U.S. National Security Council, Leo Strauss, who wrote in his canonical Natural Right and History, "Limitless capital accumulation is a moral duty and perhaps the highest moral duty." Again, you go back to this is a moral program, moral science. On the ground, Strauss's patron, David Rockefeller, expressed the moral political program more concretely at the turning point in 1991 as the Soviet Union fell. A supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and bankers is surely preferable to the national auto-determination practiced in past centuries, unquote. They're very clear about what the goal is. That's up in the web. If you looked at that, that's something. They don't shy away from what they intend and what they're doing. It's just the mass media don't carry it, and it's buried in right-wing websites like the Cato Institute is where I picked that up. Well, the promises are kept. There's no binding regulation to protect any life-carrying capacity on Earth from the loot and pollute money system in the years since. None. Many blame capitalism, but unlike classical capitalism, this mechanism is not driven by productive force development. It is driven by transnational money sequence multiplication. It's not just the exchange, it's the multiplication, the exponential multiplication that makes it cancer-like. With no productive standard, which despoils more means of life than it produces. Think of that. It destroys more means of life than it produces. It's clear. It eliminates the working class itself. It's not like classical capitalism. The ruling idea that the system is peerlessly productive is increasingly contradicted by far more life goods disappearing than are created. Something much more sinister is afoot. The social and natural life basis by which the human species evolves are reversed and overrun. Yet not even the opposition defines what ultimately counts, humanity's universal life necessities themselves. That's where we've got to start our ground. And you don't even find the concept. I've had to originate the concept. The meaning of the economy itself, to produce and distribute life goods otherwise in short supply through generational time, that's what a real economy is lost. Well, the very air humanity breathes is going more toxic and acidic. The contradiction to productive growth is unseen. As the waters of the world are simultaneously destroyed, the dots are not joined. Even as there are mass extinctions of species, youth without futures, and irreversible death servitude of the world, all is well if growth is returning to the system, which causes all of them. The Earth's very soil cover, taking tens of millions of years to evolve, is mined, acidified, salinated, degraded, and exhausted as forest and mineral covers are stripped mined from one continent to the other, and there is no connected common meaning uttered among the peoples. The ruling value mechanism devours the life substance of humanity and the earth itself, but remains assumed as ever more productive in its growth, even by angry unions who call for more growth and bargain on the basis of productivity. And as I'll go on to say, productivity is just producing for this cancerous system. Well, at least someone might reply, climate warming has been recognized by a blue ribbon economic panel, Britain's Stern Review, as the greatest and widest ranging market failure ever seen. I was very gratified to see him acknowledge that, because before then we basically had the assumed infallibility. This is a step towards rational observation. But even with a UN panel of over 1,600 scientists on the case, there's no connection to the other basic life capacities driven towards collapse by the same organizing value mechanism. No secret is more unspoken. So more rights to pollute and profit are instituted, and the climates and hydrological cycles spiral to more deadly extreme. The world's poor suffer first and most, Lord Stern also rightly observes, but this fits the reigning value mechanism. Those without money do not exist to it. Unmasking the ruling code of value driving the war on life. I think it's ultimately a knowledge war, and that we live in a knowledge world, and knowledge is what's going to determine whether we sink or advance. Let us summarize. Behind every step of the great reversal lies failures of knowledge and value understanding. 1, failure to diagnose the regulating value mechanism at work. Nowhere, really, down to exact principles determining its choices and decisions. 2, failure to connect across the domains of life despoliation is predictable from the system's money sequence multiplication. That's why the second edition of this book came out, is because everything it was predicting was coming true, but it doesn't make any difference as long as people don't know it. 3, failure to define or demand any public policies against its feeding on life support system, with public treasure supporting it every step. And 4, failure to recognize any life value principle or the life ground of the economy itself. Number 4 is basically my life work, is what is formally called life value ontoaxiology, but I release you from having to remember that term. But what it means, literally, life value, everything of value is of life value. And that means of both on the ontological level, which means the logic of all being, all existence on earth, and ontoaxiology means principles of value. So it's meant to carve out a universal, unlike our other thought systems, a universal referent that applies to all values whatsoever and all domains whatsoever. The knowledge blackout on this and everything else is understandable once one recognizes that the vaunted knowledge economy has no criterion from the start. All it means is what can be controlled, sold, or manipulated to grow the ruling value mechanism. Pause on that general fact. This is why true knowledge is so often denied or attacked as uncompetitive. Look for exceptions to this spread of the ruling money value mechanisms into the very capacities of human understanding. Really, knowledge has been the first victim here at the level of the ruling value mechanism. Right into the universities, right into the schools, right into the mass media, right into public programs, right into CBC, everywhere. It's dominating. Who even now recognizes that new efficiencies, reforms, and cost-cutting are always attacks on people's lives, means of life, and life functions? Who connects across the one-way falls of life standards and regulations, public science and testing, agrarian communities and lands, workers' rights and unions, social infrastructures and protections, and social life security across populations, while money demand multiplies out of all control at the top? See, it's a predictable system. It's a cancer system. Who names the innermost ruling code driving all? Whatever protects or enables human and ecological life is eliminated as a barrier to private money sequence multiplication. This is the source code of the cancer system. It explains why transnational corporate equity and bank profits grow to ever new records as the world's majorities are dispossessed. It explains why social and natural life capacities are despoiled across continents. The war on life is built into this system. The ideals of freedom, democracy, and economic growth are thus reversed in the name of them. The big lies, and reversals really, the big lies become so automatic that few notice them. For example, as I write, food stamp slashes reducing 47 million hungry U.S. people below $1.40 a meal for children and others, and $90 less a month for them for life necessities, quote, and this is Obama, protects the most vulnerable Americans, unquote. Well, he's doing it. That's what he says he's doing. And that's Obama, who sort of seems like a sort of middle-of-the-road guy. He's a symptom of the system. That was just January 29th. There's a recourse against lies which is as old as the species. Humanity's deciding evolutionary advantage is that knowledge wins in the end. It's about the only law you can give about society. Above all, knowledge evolves through recognition of how life is disabled or enabled by material conditions and social rules. For example, the binding abolition of the most profitable commodity of world trade ever thought impossible at the time, human slaves. Won. It still won. Knowledge won again from the 1929 crash and subsequent World War, when the collective life security of peoples evolved by known facts and social policies more in 30 years than the past 25 centuries. Knowledge being applied. The missing link for this long life and death struggle is the life value code. I almost get into a sideline about supply and demand and why Keynes was rejected and so forth, because supply must equal demand. It's the basic axiom of the whole system of understanding. Therefore, everything he talked about was illusory or wrong. Anyway, the missing link for this long life and death struggle is the life value code. We do not know it because we are without a reference body in a vast ocean of self-maximizing money sequences for which the goods are only what sell for private profit. A life-bound compass almost emerged after 1945 when people recognized how ruling delusions of self-maximizing fanaticism almost destroyed civilization. They were variations on the same theme. The Wall Street bankers and so forth, self-maximization without limit, huge inequalities and so forth, and then a more fanatic, openly fanatic version of it in Nazism. But they were both self-maximizing, both to go to the top, both with no limit, both with complete blindness to other people's lives having any value. A life ground and compass almost arose after that, because societies forge binding international covenants for collective life security and free human development. I mean, none of you know about them probably because they've been so well repressed, but there's a binding covenant, an economic, social, and human rights that makes all that we are fighting for to save, that is any social infrastructure to save life, as a binding obligation on all states who signed the agreement, which are all the major states of today. Just been swept out. It's lawless. This system is lawless at the international level. Universal education, health, and income security infrastructures were publicly formed across societies under international law, but no unifying value code underlying them was found. In absence of any sound life base of understanding to reground in, the great reversal from 1980 on has gone from one extreme of life blindness to the next, with endless lies of better days to come. even as there's ever more joblessness, and always one way. Ever more joblessness, meaningless unemployment, meaningless employment, deprivation of more majorities of peoples, commodity diseases across the globe still increasing. Debt servitude, increasing like the one from obesity and diabetes, that's all new. That's only in the last few years since junk foods. Debt servitude chaining the futures of people more indebted now than ever. It can't be paid. And deep, as a Wall Street banker said once, there's no one's ever going to pay their debts. They're just going to pay their payments on time. And that's the way it's set up. There isn't enough legal tender in the world to cover a fraction of the debts that are owed to the banks. And deepening ecocidal trends, the worst, advancing one way with the system's growth. Locked into the ruling frame of thinking, people blame humanity. Oh, humanity, what's happened for the catastrophe unfolding? But even as the demands of the ruling value mechanism have been imposed every step on humanity and societies, they've been imposed. None of it's really been agreed to. By, first of all, secretly negotiated and adjudicated, also of a secret panel that's unappealable beyond, that judges these things, above nations, above laws, unappealable, very seldom known by people, which is the transnational corporate system that is backed by, lest you wonder how do they make people do things, it's backed by global force, financial sabotage, and embargo, the key one, and huge penalties go running into the hundreds of millions of dollars a day if you don't obey. And no one voted for it. It was secretly coined. As of right now, the Trans-Pacific Partnership right now is being secretly codified and then will be imposed. From secret codification by corporate lawyers of treaties overriding constitutions themselves to free looting of human and natural life capacities across borders, ever more money sequence investor rights are prescribed and multiplied across nations. Those who resist are against competition or are terrorists. Reverse projection always rules. Always blame the other for what you're doing as the reason for attacking it. An absurd metaphysic is assumed throughout. The economy's provision of goods through time mutates to laws of supply and demand that are fatuous or caricatures of both. Demand is not people's needs or necessity, the real demand. It is private money demand minted by private banks without legal tender to back it to indebt people and gamble on their future means of life. That's what they're talking about, demand. Not really demand. Supply, similarly, is not the life means people require to survive and flourish. It is ever more priced commodities for profit, promoting more human and ecological well-being across continents. The supreme moral value of the system is then equated to its opposite as well. Freedom equals freedom for private money demand only, equals in proportion to the amount controlled, equals ever less freedom for those with less of it, equals no right for life for those without it. When mass uprooting, joblessness, and misery follow, more reverse meaning is proclaimed. Uplifted out of poverty, headlines proliferate over a money gain equal to the cost of a coffee for subsistence farmers who have been forced into city slums without any means of natural and communal life support left. They're said uplifted out of poverty because they've got money to spend equivalent to a Coke a day. Peoples are too distracted by competition for vast prizes to notice the key distraction, Olympics, Super Bowl. The global struggle for life is displaced by ever more contest spectacles as global mass marketing sites, the meaning now of sport. But behind the perpetually revolving mirrors, the meaning is taboo to see. People may see greed of the rich, but not that greed is the global system's driver at every level. More productivity is liked across classes, but who sees that it only means less cost per unit of profitable commodities, bringing more life waste and destruction. Workers and left thinkers may no more want to see this than the corporate press. If you point this out about productivity, they don't want to publish it because their interests depend on the delusion. The meaning of the free market itself is reversed. And Peter talked a lot about the free market. I mean, it isn't really a free market. I go back to the classical. Over centuries, the free market has meant the opposite of the global corporate system. Public places of local life goods, right? All opposite to what's going on at the global level. All exchange for legal tender, opposite. Featuring real foods and crafts, mostly opposite. No mass conditioning ads, opposite. No debt servitude, opposite. No dominance of transnational money sequences. No throwaway packages and waste. No lobbies controlling governments. No invisible head offices pulling puppet strings. And no bribery controlling supply and demand. It's not a free market at all. Yet the free market, like the real economy, is overwhelmed, just as in a cancer. There are only more absentee money sequences with no required life functions or accountability to the communities and life conditions they competitively bleed. That's what the competition is about, how fast they can get the money from the public, competitively draining them, hollowing them out, and that's what the competition means. But the life and death choice cannot be made without knowing both. The enemy is undefined. The common life capital it attacks is unknown. Both the life and death choice cannot be made without knowing who the enemy is and what the solution is. The life value turn, then, is the next stage of civilization. Reality hides in the language of the past. So capitalism is blamed by critics when real capital is in fact destroyed at every step. Journals report global wealth has soared 68% in 10 years, but life wealth is devoured as fast as the money sequence system can grow. Always the underlying life ground is lost beneath the competitive self-multiplication of the money demand invading all that exists. With no life value anchor and compass, the degenerate trends only deepen beneath reference body to recognize what they are. And I've spent most of my life as a professional philosopher on the problem of life value and social value systems. Although the sane may agree life value is what ultimately matters, nothing has been less understood. People called pro-life usurp the woman's body in the name of fundamentalist religions. Nations absurdly assume that standard of living is measured by the private money spent. Animal rights theory has no criterion to tell the life value of a snail from a person. Life sciences, all in quotes, sacrifice billions of animal lives a year for private money value gain, just about all of it. New and better technology has no life value standard to decide better from worse. Life value is the missing base. We really must get that one clear. But there are as many proxies for life value as there are values. Specialist domains like physiotherapy and medicine recognize life value in organic functions, but without principled meaning to apply to wider life systems. In general, life value ignorance defines our age. This is how the greatest of all fatal confusions has mutated, that money sequence growth equals life value growth. That's at the core of the whole cancer system. Just as the multiplying grotesque cancer cells eating the life host alive are not recognized on the micro level, so too on the social level of life organization. The proliferation, in fact, the exponential proliferation of banknotes, of bets, credit, and debt without legal tender drive financialization across the planet more daily than all the GDPs of the countries of the world put together over a year. They must loot life and life bases to keep growing without inflation, as trillions of new dollars are printed without life function. How are you going to have more and more money chasing fewer and fewer life goods? Well, just take it away from everybody else. So endless slashing of life goods and wages, benefits, Social Security, pensions, and environmental protections result as money demand powers multiply at the top. This is why endless bonuses for financial failure, stripping of the middle classes and the poor, squandering of public wealth on rich corporations, the list can go on, are demanded as U.S.-led wars for resources, new lands, and corporate markets never stop, and taxes on the rich are reversed. all predictable from the metaprogram. All is predictable once the cancer system is diagnosed. An ultimate question thus arises. What is the ground of response to this ruling value mechanism which cumulatively plunders human and other life to feed itself? We know the ultimate ground is life value, but what is life value? The objective standard and measure can be defined in 3 steps. All value whatever is life value. 2, good versus bad equals the extent to which life is more coherently enabled versus disabled. So it's basically enabling life, coherently enabling life value, or disabling it. It's good and bad, and it admits of degrees. By greater, lesser ranges or capacities of thought, felt being, and action through time. Those are the 3 fields of life that include all that is of value in life. And it all can be, the thing is, with the life value theory or understanding, you have no problem of difference of opinions because it's objective. It has objective measures too that nobody can coherently disagree with. The thing is, we haven't got down there for all the reasons I've been stating. Well, of course, we've had visions of world peace, the classless flourishing of people's lives, more equality, a planetary ecology in which humanity is its conscious understanding. All these ideals express this underlying life code of value. But who decides, skeptics ask? No one decides, because gains and losses in life capacity, that's the key, life capacity, are as objective as the laws of biology and medicine. Anything is better or worse by the greater or lesser range of life capacities it enables. It's almost worth remembering. Anything is better or worse by the greater or lesser range of life capacities it enables. Applies everywhere. This value code is built into evolution itself. I'm not inventing anything. I'm decoding. It is no matter a matter of opinion than people's life necessities are. And what is a need? What is a necessity? It's that without which life capacities are always reduced. It's objective. The ruling value mechanism is the polar opposite. It attacks life and life conditions everywhere as vehicles to its self-multiplying growth. Because this growth is assumed to be life value, however, the greatest value reversal in history goes unnoticed. The 3-step life code of value provides the generic life value compass and base, which has been missing. It is objective because it is true, independent of anyone's perception of it. It has unlimited validity because there is no exception to it, which is testable by searching for one. It is presupposed in value judgments, as you can observe whenever these judgments are defended. They always end up, if they're saying it somehow protects or enables life. Life value is also universalizable because all values derive their worth from it. Finally, life value is sovereign because it trumps any other value in cases of conflict. All of these are testable generalizations. I've written 3 volumes for UNESCO, by the way, on this. But what of measure, or more or less life value? Life value is measurable in degrees by greater, lesser capacities of thought or felt being and action shown through time. For example, how much life capacities gain or lose by nourishing versus junk foods. Today, the macro trends are in one-way loss of life capacities. Knowledge is the exception. It forms the way stations of life understanding passed on to others and subsequent generations across epochs, the distinguishing life capacity of the human species. But even knowledge is threatened by corporate rights against this dissemination at the same time as there is mass propagation of public lies. New electronic communication capacities without corporate control still win the war by the greatest civil community development in history, the Internet. But the life and death fields of invasion by the ruling money value mechanism are not decoded. The money tides of hit and run buying and selling of lands and currencies across the world, free and growing use of ecocidal extraction methods, life-starving hours and wages, no benefits and global dispossession. Oh, it goes on. It's so despairing. lethal arms, trading, oil-guzzling and noise-polluting vehicles of multiplying kinds, big oil and big pharma, looting of public lands and health dollars. Always it's looting public wealth. You can't go a step without it. At the cost of hundreds of millions of people, and most invisibly, full-spectrum assault on humanity's thinking and feeling sides of being alive, living itself, the zombie effect. Where we might ask, do the transnational money sequences not destructively invade the evolved fields of life of humanity and fellow species? Exponentially multiplying money sequences eat away at the margins of every private transaction, public funding, life exchange and substance with and across borders. Consider all the bites every moment across business and exchange sites, beyond the carrying trade and exploiting lower interest rates in one country to flood another with cheaper money advantage. You know, what's doing Venezuela in right now, beyond the trillions in derivatives betting every day, beyond the raids on sovereign currencies and bonds. All of this should be illegal, it used to be, without tax or regulation. On the local level, hardly a shop, a buyer, a builder, a home dweller. This was pointed out to me, by the way, by a Zeitgeist member who's a professor of physics. He says, look at it. On the local level, try to look anywhere, any exchange, any step. A buyer, a builder, I'm putting it in summative language, a home dweller. Anybody who lives today is not invaded by the same financial mechanism, with ever more rights to demand at every exchange site with no function, while enforcement is paid by the public, being stripped by it. The apparently free credit card system, for example, and few will know this, imposes a 2% charge to the seller for sales at a hidden 33% annual debt charge rate, before the debt predation even sets in. There's no end to the invisible lines of life-devouring demands, now moving deeply into higher learning, into public health themselves. I mean, hospitals are governed, and universities, they're not governed by their constitutions anymore. They're governed by how much revenue they bring in, and that's governed in turn by boards of managers who are themselves corporate executives, and on it goes. On to the wars themselves, where we have destabilizations from which fire prices can be extracted from the societies, and societies are destroyed deliberately for this reason. They have no means of defense against the stripping of them then. How else would a cancer system behave? So if you think of it, this model, it's an explanatory model, not a metaphor. How else would it, if it's true, or if, you just want to test it's true, how else, if you were going to have a cancer at a social level of life organization, how else could it behave than the way it's behaving? Always one way. Always disabling. The world-deciding choice begins with what you buy. Clearly, for example, eating, selling, or supplying junk foods is objectively bad to the measure it disables human life and produces global epidemics of obesity, heart failure, cancer, and diabetes, which it does. Yet even economic science calls them all goods. It's written right into the textbooks. They're all goods. Newspapers call them all goods. This immense presupposition against fact goes without notice, whatever the rising disease effects. Simultaneously, violence entertainments flood public airwaves and play spaces as the same consumers, most avidly the young, they are seeing flooding images of humanity being killed, tortured, injured, humiliated. And as the sugar, lard, salt concoctions are ladled into bloodstreams and throwaways clog the Earth's circulatory channels at the same time, we begin to see the multiplying destructive occupation of the fields of life and life substance as built into these runaway growths and their goods. Life capacities at every level are attacked as market freedom. Only life value ground and measure can penetrate the disease none define. And this, hope I don't run out of voice, to addictively disable human life capacities for more transnational money sequences through ever more lives from infancy onward. Addictively disable. That's the secret to all these commodities, as far as they can take it. Where's their exception? Life activity replacing motors in commercial games, endless unneeded and non-cyclical, non-recyclable conveniences, locking into habits of life, political junkie election images and spectacles, where the truth is what sells, corporate candidates, and commercial internet and television hooks everywhere in front of which children spend 11 hours a day. Which of any of these is not geared to addict consumers to compulsive consumption against their life capacity development? What does not input toxic waste into the circulatory flows of ecosystems at the same time? But all is optimal for the ruling economic model for which life and society are reduced to atomic desiring machines, propelling more money demand to money controllers as the nature of the growth the official world always calls for. And by the way, these words about humans as desiring machines, that's written right into neoclassical economics. They're desiring machines that seek to maximize, and that's all. And this is the way you manufacture consent, is by getting hold of that desire level and selling to them and requiring them to work for it. The moving line of the true war of liberation begins with what we are able to control our own lives. Consider your own life, what you know best. Every value you enjoy, lose, or gain has a bottom line, in-life capital, what enables life to reproduce and grow rather than degrade and stagnate through time. We defend it and our health by buying life goods and nothing else. The turning point is as old as physical and cultural evolution. Every human advances by knowing what enables life from what does not. Collective life advances transmitting this life and death knowledge across selves and generations. The life value code holds across all cultures, but the universal life goods and necessities are not even known. Their meaning is obscured everywhere, but they are exactly definable. Life goods are always that without which life capacities decline and die. All real needs are known by this criterion. Every human life suffers and degenerates towards disease and death without, and here are the universal life necessities of human beings, without breathable and unpolluted air. And think of how I'm not going to be able to spell out how every one of them is under attack. Breathable and unpolluted air, clean water and waste cycles, nourishing food and drink, protective living space, supportive love, health care when needed, a life-coherent environment, symbolic interaction itself, and meaningful work to perform. All these are measurable in sufficiency across cases, and all people have these universal human life necessities. Yet all universal human life needs and capacities are at the same time attacked, polluted, or perverted by the ruling value mechanism in product, process, and lobby demand across the world. I could tell a story, and in fact have written pages and pages and pages in detail of how every one of them is taken apart and destroyed. Yet where are the universal life needs themselves even named and connected against the malignant growth system spreading through every more nodes? Well, not zero growth, as some people are wanting to say now, but zero bad growth is the way. A real economy, by definition, regulates for what these universal life necessities require and against toxic junk, and the individuals would not buy 99% of these corporate commodities if they followed this principle. Victory or loss in the war of the world lies in how we live. So why does anyone buy such commodities? System addiction is how it grows, and knowledge what life goods versus bad is the through line of the good life and of human evolution itself. What deeper motivation could there be? And then I just will add with the end of this section, I, like many others, have long lived without corporate ad television. without habitual private use of gas vehicle use of any kind, any junk food or beverage, any throwaway item, any new fashion or commodity not more life-enabling than the old, or any business with private banks selecting for life goods at the local level. The organizing principle is the spirit of the Tao Te Ching and the free autonomy of the wise, back to the Stoics. It is as old as the good life. The life code formula is clear: minimal market demand to enable life capacities to flourish. This value imperative defines transformation to true economy and liberates life wherever it moves. And now I move to the final and the key sort of original section that I hadn't done so much work on before. And it's on collective life. Collective life capital is the common value ground and measure across divisions. We know the war of the world can be won. The plague addiction to corporate cigarettes has been conquered by most of the developed world's population. I mean, the addiction, I've talked to a psychiatric witness on this. Cigarettes are worse than heroin, specialists told me, in terms of addiction. And yet, the most people have kicked it. Well, they can do that with that. They can do it with this system. This shows how the life code can select against habituated system harms of the most compulsive kind, and everybody live better from what is done. At the personal level, it begins with zero-based accounting, with money demand only justified by life-enabling gain. Yet for collective life goods, we do not have a principled ground and measure. It's the great terra incognita of modern economic thought. Collective life capital does not exist in public or expert meaning. Any common life interest or agency at all is excluded unless it promotes profits. The implications are fatal, but unseen. Collective provision of the universal human life necessities that have evolved through long social organization and human evolution are blinkered out by the ruling value mechanism. It sees only mechanical growth by commodity sales and profits. Everything that makes a society civilized or livable is blinkered out. Common water and sewage systems for all. All of these are blinkered out a priori. Because of game theory, one of the ways, I could get a gain and go very deep with this, and I do in that book. Common water and sewage systems, free movement pathways, and life spaces without cost to use. Or sidewalks, for example, the bicycle paths that I use every day. Public libraries with unpriced books and films. Non-profit health care and disease prevention by public institution. All of these are collective life capital that don't exist within the ruling model, and that's why they're always defunded. Public income security from disemployment, old age, and disability. Life protective laws, including sufficient minimum wages and environmental regulations. Primary to higher education without multiplying debts. Family housing, food, and means of life assistance for children without parental money. Yet all of these are defunded or eliminated to pay debt services to private banks and grow business, with the IMF to the Tea Party leading the charge as new efficiencies and savings. From this built-in erasure of common life ground, the hollowing out of collective life goods proceeds without any feedback correction. Public wealth is privatized at every level to feed corporate money sequences, and they all think they're doing the right thing. Listen to our finance minister. Thus fed with endless giant tax and subsidy handouts and deregulations to invade further, the demands of the ruling value mechanism continue to multiply. The collective life base to steer by and to regulate by does not exist. For example, even at the high levels of the best economic theorists. For example, when Amartya Sen entitles his Nobel laureate monograph, Social Choice, I was hoping, he's going to get into it. Even he can get no further than atomic aggregates of individual preferences. Even Amartya Sen. No collective life goods in themselves are conceivable within the market paradigm. When another progressive economist, Eleanor Ostrom, wins the Nobel Prize for Economics years later for her book, now advising Obama, and her book is called Governing the Commons, The Evolution and Institution of Collective Action. Well, I was again looking so forward to reading this, but she's trapped within the same paradigm. No principle of common life interest or agency beyond mutual self-advantage can even be conceived by her.